Secret agent man, secret agent man. They've given you a number and taken away your name.
Welcome back to EnterTheRealWorld.com. It's been so long since There Will Be Movies ended, but we're back with a brand new podcast for the brand new year. We're recording this before 2020 has arrived. Presumably 2020 is a year that really exists, but we'll find out if you're hearing this. My name is Matt Waters. I'm joined for this brand new podcast by Ben Phillips. Ben, before we get into what we're doing here, although if you look at the episode descriptions you can see. But anyway, how are you?
I'm good. It's not been a while, but it's been a couple of weeks.
I mean, I could ask how your Christmas has been, but we don't know yet. What are your strong predictions on how your Christmas is going to be?
Lots of food, lots of booze.
Yeah.
I might have to show my grandmother The Favourite, which will go very interestingly, I'm sure.
Oh no! Why must you? Did you lose a bet?
No, because she wants to watch it because it's got royal people in it, and I'm sat there kind of going oh, do I want to show her the very, very gay, very, very offbeat movie about a member of the royal family?
Yeah, where Emma Stone fingers a sponge or something like that. Well, we're not doing that. This is called Secret Agent Men, as the dope-ass intro song, thank you Saskia Parks, suggests. So this is a podcast dealing with Bond, Bourne, and Mission Impossible. It's not a B, so it's not quite alliterative. But yes, the three big secret agent spy action film series, and they bounced off each other. They arose from the ashes with each other, where, two of these are big legacy franchises that kind of made comebacks and got bad and got good again, and then Bourne just sort of, there are books, but it did kind of, in the filmic sense, just came out of nowhere.
But it's actually quite interesting that Bond and Bourne are both based on books, but also absolutely not based on books. I don't think either of them, apart from maybe the first movie in the series, are actually take the plot from the book that they're based on.
Yeah, they take titles and loose concepts and that's it. But yeah, so this is episode 1, so we're going to do Mission Impossible, the first, released 1996, which, my god, that was so long ago, and yet I remember it. Well, yeah, I would have been 7, so some of my earliest memories are from 1996. But I did not remember watching Mission Impossible at the time. Obviously, tiny baby child, but Mission Impossible is a film that I feel the sort of handful of big scenes are just ingrained in everyone's memory and have been for a very long time. But it's been a while since I watched it start to finish, so if we get nothing else out of this podcast, we've achieved that.
Yeah, I genuinely cannot remember the last time I watched this movie all in one sitting. It's one of those ones that's it feels like it was just always on, and you would just kind of tune in, and I've seen this movie more times in piecemeal than in an actual contained sitting.
Yes. As we go, we're going to kind of contrast and compare the sort of journey as a lot of, I think, fair criticism or maybe not even criticism, just pointing out that they started to kind of copy each other or riff off each other or adapt to each other. But obviously, as this is the beginning of our journey, we can't do that. And also, I should point out, obviously, there are 24 Bond films soon.
25 by the time we finish this.
Well, soon to be 25. We're not going to do them all, because that would be a much longer podcast, and it would just be a lot of uninterrupted Bond, and we thought it would be fun to flip between them. So we're doing Daniel Craig Bond. There was a strong push to potentially cover GoldenEye, because it's fucking great, and came out 1 and a bit years before this, I think.
Yeah,
1 year before this.
The kind of unwritten statement of this is Mission Impossible doesn't become the Mission Impossible that's reacting to stuff until Mission Impossible 3. And there were 3 different pitches for this series, which were start with GoldenEye, start with Mission Impossible, start with Mission Impossible 3, although start with Bourne.
It's one thing to start at GoldenEye and then either skip over the rest of the Brosnan ones or do all of the Brosnan ones and then do the Craig ones, and it's another to just do the 2 less good Mission Impossibles before they got good. So
yeah, the thing is, we are doing one dreadful movie,
yes,
as part of this, rather than also covering Die Another Day, which it would be a battle which movie is worse out of those 2.
Yeah, Wild Is Not Enough isn't great either.
But does it have invisible cars and a man getting plastic surgery because he's got diamonds in his face?
He gets his sleep removed with a machine, and there's a massive satellite that fires the sun at things. Yeah.
There's a joke about Halle Berry wanting something bigger, and then you cut in and see that he's putting diamonds into her belly button.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, this is Mission Impossible 1, directed by Brian De Palma of Scarface and The Untouchables and many other films fame. Coming into this, though, I don't think he'd had much of a hit, and that was sort of his impetus behind doing it. He wanted a big commercially successful film again, and this was.
I mean, was it Kalita's Way before this one?
Yeah, probably the last big one before this, yeah. But he had a whole bunch of films that like I barely remember, or if I know of them, they're bad, and so
he's one of those names who kind of like, I feel like the 90s hit them hard. I mean, like, you look at his 80s, like Blowout, Scarface, Untouchables, all really great. Bonfire of the Vanities is Bonfire of the Vanities.
And then Life Comes at You First. And he would go on to make that... How is it so boring, The Black Dahlia? Considering the subject matter and the actors he's got to work with, how did he make that so boring? So that was his vested interest here, is to get a hit going again. Written by David Kopp, I don't know how to pronounce that, Kopp maybe? Who wrote fucking Jurassic Park and Spider-Man 1, amongst many other very good films. Robert Towne, who did fucking Chinatown, The Old Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV show, so that makes some sense. And more importantly, he wrote Days of Thunder and The Firm, both starring one Thomas Cruise. And then Steven Zaillian gets a story credit, Schindler's List, Gangs of New York, The Irishman, many other films. So, it's a pretty solid group of writers there. Possibly the best trio, I don't know, I mean, off the top of my head, that we're going to get in this series, but we'll see.
There's some good writers. I feel like these are writers who are kind of not slumming it, but this isn't like their best script. Like you list their great movies, where there are other writers who do this whose best script is arguably the Bond or the Bourne or the Mission Impossible that they wrote.
Oh yeah, I just mean like before the movie even gets made, that's a pretty solid team to attach to it.
Especially to think like this is based on a television show.
I know. Have you seen a single episode of Mission
I haven't seen a single episode. I think my entire knowledge of the show is obviously like the theme song being great and also the fact that Peter Graves hates this movie.
Yeah, he does. The self-destructing tapes, the montage of clips from the upcoming episode that spoil it if you're paying enough attention, the theme song, IMF, Impossible Missions Force, like, what a great... they are wise to call them your IM Force or just IMF in this, rather than fully acknowledging there is a government task force called Impossible Missions Force. It is just under 2 hours, $80 million budget, $458 million gross. That is a hefty sum of profit, but...
This is Tom Cruise at his, like, Tom Cruise kingiest. Is that 90 stretch where, I mean, is it the same year he's got Jerry Maguire? Yeah, so he does Jerry Maguire and Mission Impossible in the same year.
Yeah.
He's
flexing.
This is kind of like, and there's an argument to be made that Tom Cruise is kind of like the last vestige of the great movie stars of the like 90s, where just him being in it is enough to make a movie, and he's one of those people who still just him being in a movie is enough to get people in seats, unless it's the money, but that's neither here nor there. But it's also about this era where like the people that Tom Cruise is working with are also kind of insane, where like Oliver Stone, Tony Scott, Ron Howard, Rob Reiner, Sidney Pollack, Brian De Palma, Cameron Crowe, Kubrick, Paul Thomas Anderson, and then in the early 2000s it's like Steven Spielberg. And it's just like this like huge name, and he's more interested in kind of working with big name directors, of which Brian De Palma definitely is. And yes. I have to imagine that Tom Cruise is the guy going like, I want to work with someone interested on this. Can we get Brian De Palma or someone of that kind of stature to do this movie?
That's exactly it. So Paramount owned the rights to the TV show. They were trying to make a film for a long time, couldn't get it together, and Cruise was a big fan of the show growing up. So he had started a new production company, I think Cruise Wagner, I think their logo is at the beginning, and he chose this as his first project. And at first it was him and Sidney Pollack, but then he hired Brian De Palma, who brought with him this writing team, and they made multiple drafts and nobody liked any of them, and they started production without a shooting script or any kind of script really. But Brian De Palma had designed his big action set pieces, and the writers didn't like how they got from action piece to action piece.
I mean, there's not much this movie does in between the action set pieces.
Well, I would say that is my entire review of the thing. It's very obvious that they just wrote down their big action scenes and then didn't have a fucking clue how to connect them, because Town gave them a beginning, middle, and end, and Kopp and De Palma tried to fill in the gaps, but like all of the connective tissue of this movie is so sketchy to bad. The big scenes are really, really good, but it's just anything that's happening between them is confusing or bad.
Yeah, it's so confusing. It's insane how convoluted everything is when they're like talking about the plot of it, and it kind of becomes like the staple for these kind of movies is that like they really are kind of incomprehensible. These kind of spy movies in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I still don't think I fully have down the kind of machinations behind everything that goes on Casino Royale.
No, not really. Well, we'll see if we get it any better next time.
Like it's a great movie, Casino Royale, but I also think it's just kind of like I feel like you have to be paying full attention to like understand everything. It's like early Game of Thrones. You sit there and you watch it and you go like, I don't know who anyone is. I'm just attacked.
I'll just go with it, and I'll emotionally attach to people and just trust that they're on the right side of things. Oh no, wait, they're not.
And then you get to the end of it and you go like, oh yeah, I know every single character's name. But because these movies come out once every like 4 years, there's no chance for you to do that. And the other thing is, there's no supporting cast really for any of these movies.
So speaking of how convoluted it is, how like the big scenes and what connects it, our mission this time around. So Jim Phelps of the original TV show, the only returning character, and you know the IMF as a concept return from the show. So he and his team are deployed to prevent the theft of a copy of the NOC list. That is a list of the real names of all the undercover agents of, I don't know if it's the CIA or just the entire of the US.
Yeah, because they break into Langley, so it's presumably the CIA, like the non-official cover list.
Yes. So they get word that it's going to be stolen from a US embassy in Prague, and then when the mission goes south, Ethan Hunt is left as the only survivor and is framed and is forced to go undercover to find the real mole and clear his name. That is your big overarching plot of this. It is the premise we are presented with early on. I think it's sketchy at best. Like, it's really unclear at times why he's doing what he's doing. Beyond just the broad, I have to find out who the real undercover person is and clear my name. It's like, wait, what are you doing right now? Why are you stealing the real list? Like,
he's stealing the real list because he has to give Max the real list so that she could trust him enough to bring Job there, even though Job
would probably be there anyway. Just go to the meeting with a blank fucking disc, man.
Which he has. He has a blank fucking
I know he
disc.
does.
Instead, the climax of this movie is based around the Wi-Fi signal maybe not being good enough.
Pretty much. And our agent for this movie is, as I mentioned, Ethan Hunt. So Tom Cruise, let's be real, there isn't much in the way, certainly in these early ones, there isn't much in the way of a personality to Ethan Hunt that distinguishes him. He's kind of just playing Tom Cruise in every action movie starring Tom Cruise. Like,
yeah, that's the thing. Is like, this is before Tom Cruise's meltdown, which we'll get into in like later episodes. This is like movie star Tom Cruise, who's kind of a bit of a blank scyther, where he just jumps from movie to movie, and he's kind of always perfect.
Yes.
All of the movies he's in, he is very much kind of like the great hero at the centre. I think like Bourne on the 4th of July is kind of the closest he got before now to being
in any way flawed.
Yeah, and then Jerry Maguire, he's definitely very flawed in that like the first half of the movie is all about saying like, yeah, well, if you took everything away from Tom Cruise and you start to get the inkling that there's an insane man inside him. And I think what makes later Mission Impossible so good is that it's the series where he falls back onto what if he was an insane man. But we are not there yet. We're still that kind of action hero Tom Cruise who is perfect and will succeed at everything.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like American Bond, but it's like Bond light. The broad strokes are there. Like, yes, he's an adrenaline junkie. Yes, he has this strong moral compass. Generally, he's upstanding. I think Ethan's a bit less of a lady killer. I seem to remember he seduces a lady in the second one, but like it's a little bit less, let's sleep with all the ladies.
I mean, but that's kind of an issue with Tom Cruise, is that there are very few actresses that he has chemistry with.
Yes, many a rumour going around Hollywood.
But no, it's like there are a few actresses that he has chemistry with. There are a few that he does. I think he does have chemistry with Renee Zellweger in Jeremy Maguire. I think he does have chemistry with Emily Blunt in Edge of Tomorrow. But it very much is like they couldn't base a movie around him having chemistry with a female lead and have him be a lady killer in that way, because it's just not Tom Cruise's vibe. And
then I would also say that, like, I mean, he is like very sarcastic as in the way Bond is, but he's less dry. But that's a cultural difference, I think. And then the biggest difference is, from memory, Ethan is always deployed in a team, and it is very like he is a special agent from an agency. So like he's got his people in the chair, he's got his other contacts, he's got his tech specialist, and like Bond obviously has a little bit of that he brushes up against occasionally, but he is very much like a one-man unit who every now and then is like, ugh, fine, you help me. You know, there are times where Ethan's kind of going it alone, but the premise is always like, right, he is one of many, and he's the lead man, he's the point man, but like, I feel that's like a key difference.
Yeah, it's kind of like all of these movies really take about 3 films to settle on like who are actors who will recur in this, because otherwise it is always like there is someone new showing up and kind of popping their head in, and because of what the movies are, there's so little time that they actually have to like paint a picture of a supporting cast. And I mean, this movie kind of shows it to a T in the fact that like they start by casting at the time quite big actors, and then they kill them all off within about 10 minutes. No, it's like half an hour. It does take half an hour for them to like kill off the first IMF team.
Yeah, which was originally scripted to be the entire whoever was still game cast of the TV show, and then one by one they were like, no, not if I'm dying in 10 minutes. And it's like, I don't know, I feel in another era with like more clout, you'd get people like leaping to do something like that, like, oh, reprise my old role, that sounds like fun. But the original cast are not thrilled with this, especially the lead, who is replaced by Jon Voight. And yeah, I mean, the big thing here is that like they take the protagonist of all but one season of the TV show and have him revealed as the big villain in this. Like he's gone bad, he's gone rogue. Look, I can see why you'd be irritated by this, but given what this franchise has become since then, I don't know. It's kind of a cool little thing to pick that up, and like I had no clue of that when I was like I'd seen however many of these before I even knew there was a TV show, and then to much later learn, oh, Jon Voight's character is the fucking lead from the TV show. Oh, that's kind of cool. But yeah, you know, he feels how he feels. So as I said, I think the big scenes here are all really good, and everything else is not, and they start by giving you that like flavour of what IMF do. Like you get the fake room and the rubber masks. Oh, the rubber masks. Are they still in the newer ones? Because I've seen up to 4, and I don't remember them being in 4, but that doesn't mean they weren't.
I mean, like they continue to use them in fun and interesting ways in the later movies.
I assume at some point there's like a digital one or some shit like that.
Like, I mean, everyone's seen the trailer for Fallout. The scene in the bathroom with Cavill and Cruz. There is a very fun kind of like track of what's going on with a face mask during that scene, which I won't spoil, but it is there in that scene.
Well, there was certainly a heavy element of the second one in particular, but
yeah, the second one is like insane, because it's like they went to John Woo, who is fresh off Face Off at this point, and kind of said, what if the entire cast of the film could become different people?
When you've just got one concept in your head, it takes a while to get it out of there. But yeah, you get the whole, this is what they do. They create these elaborate deceptions. They have these like incredibly realistic masks.
What's really interesting about this movie is, apart from one, every single person who's got the mask looks like Tom Cruise.
Well, it's interesting because in my head they always it's another actor, so it's like an impossibly realistic looking mask because it's actually them, and then at the exact moment he's going to actually take it off, they just CGI it together, and it's like, oh, okay. But then totally, when they go to the embassy in Prague, it's like, that's just Tom Cruise in prosthetics doing the only accent he can do.
There's the Russian guy who doesn't even talk, or like wherever he's from, like who's doing the interrogation, and that's the first big like mask pull of the movie.
Yeah.
And the second one is the one that they keep going back to of like the American senator who he's just Tom Cruise in prosthetics.
Why aren't you in uniform tonight, son? It's like, oh my god, can you just do this one southern accent so you thought you'd be this? They do the classic, this tape will just self-destruct in 5, and like the whole movie on a plane in a cassette with a tiny little screen and a like giant ass remote that controls it, all just mwah, perfect. And then the dope fucking theme song, obviously a staple of Bond is there is a different song every time, and I would say 2/3 of them are really good, but we have one just really good theme song here for Mission Impossible, although we will get a slight rearrangement of it the next time we're with this franchise. But yeah, it's a really, really, really good theme song. I can see why you wouldn't change it. And they totally do, the montage of clips. Like, I don't know if just growing up, I only ever saw it from after the credits have finished, the opening titles, but like I had no memory that they do the montage of clips, and there's some fucking spoilers in there, and there's stuff that they cut from the film, like Ethan kissing Claire. I think there's a montage of Ethan kissing Claire in the opening credits, and that's not in the film, so I was like, okay. And I think if you look really carefully you can tell that Jim is the bad guy, but hey.
This movie deploys the Jim twist in the most fascinating way.
It is really cool, I think.
It's so weird how it does it, though, because the movie's kind of expecting the audience to go, like, we are also revealing what's happening right now, and whether or not Ethan Hunt is figuring out at the same time is left up in the air, sort of.
Yeah, it's surprisingly sophisticated for something in this genre to, like, have what you're seeing not match what you're hearing, and, like, not have him go, aha! Although I say that, there is a whole bunch of replaying some dialogue you just heard, just so that you can follow along with what he's doing, but I think that's just them being lost in how to connect the dots. But speaking of those dots, that Prague mission at the post-credits is really, really good. Just it going to shit spectacularly. The iconic, surprisingly gruesome elevator death scene for Emilio, uncredited here, Emilio Estevez.
On memory, they cut away before his face, but they actually show, like, the thing impaling his face.
I would imagine you have seen several TV versions of the film that can be shown in the middle of the day, so they do cut away a bit earlier than that. And just seeing them all just die one by one blown up, one stabbed, all of that. And there's a heavy focus on gadgets as well. A lot like Bond, but these are more like, I don't know how to describe them, because they're both, CIA spyware, but like this feels more like real NSA style cameras everywhere type shit versus Bond's like, this seemingly innocuous object will actually detonate a nuclear bomb.
I mean, they do have that with the gun that is a bomb, which is obviously like the big, not MacGuffin, but like the big Chekhov's gun of the film. In that it gets used multiple times to kind of get them out of hot air. But I really like that they do the camera, like first-person camera view, where like whenever he is wearing the glasses, they will shoot the film from first-person point of view, and only present it in that way. Which
I think it all looks pretty good as well. And like, it's sort of a rarity to commit that hard to something like that, because there's this like unwritten rule in Hollywood where you have to be showing your star's face as often as possible, and to have so many scenes where it's just Tom Cruise narrating over it and stuff. And they made this decision to shoot in Prague like not long after it had been liberated from communism and stuff, and so it hadn't been shown in Hollywood much. And it's a really incredible looking, I want to call it a set, but this sort of series of locations in the embassy building and the sort of surrounding streets, the Charles Bridge, all of that sort of stuff. It looks really good on film, and like running through the mist that sort of just descends from out of nowhere and all that sort of stuff.
For as much of the plot of the movie happens in kind of the second half, they don't leave Prague for quite a long time.
Yeah, because he meets up with Kittredge at this restaurant, and I really like that he notices everyone in the restaurant is someone from the embassy or around it. Like, that's a really nice touch that he puts. And it's that thing of, Tom Cruise action heroes are like perfect, and Ethan Hunt has this sort of supernatural ability to do all this shit. A real primer for the Bourne identity, by the way.
Henry Czerny feels like the kind of guy who could come back and probably should have come back to a Mission Impossible movie at this point. Like, for the amount of things that they do pick up from previous movies, and obviously there's the whole joke of like the person in charge of the IMF pretty much changes in every single film. But I think it's the kind of thing where like that's the one thread where it's like, it'd be nice as a callback to the first movie to get someone like that back.
And I think he's good. Like, you distrust him immediately. They're doing a lot of like low angle camera work and stuff to make him seem really sinister. The whole fish tank thing, Tom Cruise thought this up. He was adamant about it, and he had to do the stunt himself because it didn't look realistic. And this will begin a long train of him doing his own stunts that will not come back to haunt him for a while, but will it come back to haunt him? But he did almost all of his on this one, and it helped keep the costs down because they didn't have to pay a stunt dude. Not that stunt dudes make a huge amount, but
no. But I do really like the kind of conversation he has where he starts to realise that he's being surveyed, and just the way the camera kind of pushes in and makes it a little bit like he feels more paranoid as it kind of goes, and it's got this kind of like cock angle to it. And I mean, this movie does look really good.
It does.
I'm higher on it than you are in that. Like, I just
think all the connective stuff is so weak that I can't give the overall film a pass. Like, I can be like, these 3 or 4 scenes are iconic, but I can't say this is an overall really good movie.
I don't think it's like really good. I think there are a lot better Mission Impossible movies to come, but I do think it looks stylish enough. It's doing enough interesting things. There's enough interesting performances. Like, I think it isn't as cohesive as kind of the later ones, and that's due to a troubled production. But the fact that the movie works as well as it does in spite of all that is kind of...
I think you just have to kind of go with it. Like, him goes back to the safe house, and I like the little touch of like breaking the glass as like a little intruder alarm, and the convoluted like 90s ass internet shit where the public have no concept of what the internet really is but here's like how a secret agent would use the internet. It's like, what is this?
Yeah,
like,
it's like typing in, searching for message boards, trying to find about who the job 3114 is, and just like looking on the regular internet apparently on like message boards and trying to find things. And then he sees a Bible.
Yes.
And he's just like, oh, it's not Job 314, it's Job 314.
Yeah,
so
which I'm sure someone wrote that down and was like, that's so fucking clever, man. High five me right now. And it's like, but what? Because he knows that this figure called Max is trying to buy the knock list, and that someone called, a Job 314, and then it turns out the mole, because they also think there's a mole in IMF, and they suspect it to be Ethan, and Ethan puts together that it's Job, and that Job is the alias of the mole in IMF. But it's like, but if they're all dead. Well, I mean, IMF is bigger, but, you know, it's just so, like, you have to just go with it, and he's like, Job, and you're like, okay, but then he's emailing Max as Job, and then Max figures out he's not Job, but then he continues to email Max as Job, and it's like, what? Who?
No, but he does it as Job 315. He's one later. But it's like he sees it by looking at a Bible, and you think the Bible is just the inspiration for what happened, but the Bible is also the crucial part of like where the other person, the actual Job, got the name from, because John Voight's character steals a Gideon stamped Bible from a hotel that he stayed at,
and he takes it overseas with him instead of just relying on the fact there will be a Bible somewhere in Europe, like deeply Catholic Europe.
And it's just like, this is the whole thing. It's like, what is going on?
I know, and that's what I'm saying. They were just like, oh fuck, how do we this, I guess. Like, I feel like they were looking around the writer's room and saw a fucking Bible and were like, I've got it.
It tracks, but if you put any thought on it more than about, 15 seconds, it just completely crumbles.
And that's the stuff that was flying out at me on this rewatch, because obviously the big action scenes are seared into my brain, but I forgot all of this. And I was like, oh god, was it always this? Did I ever think this shit was, smooth and clever? But I don't know. And then you got this really out of place for the genre nightmare scene, with John Voight stumbling in, you let me down, Ethan, and all of this, and then he snaps out of it. It's like, this, you don't get a lot of dream sequences in this genre, do you?
No, but also I like that it's we just need to prove to you, John Voight isn't gone. He's earning more of a paycheck for this movie than some of the other guys who are only in that one scene.
Please don't be suspicious that he's one of the biggest names on the cast, but he's dead already. We promise he'll keep coming back in dreams. He's not the villain, I promise.
Yeah, but I also really love that because it's early days of the internet. He just messages about the message boards the same thing, but he translates it into German. It's just
sitting there typing in all the languages that you know.
Could you imagine if you were sat there running a Bible web page and then someone messaged you the most cryptic bullshit in the world?
I know. What about the however many others that he fucking spammed?
Max at BibleClub.com. It's what is?
What?
Is he just guessing the email address?
Yeah, he sure is. He just Googled, Bible. Well, didn't even Google. Google didn't exist. He just search-stringed Bible. Yeah.
Why aren't we doing a mini-series about, 90s computer movies?
There's not enough patience and time, so they're all aggressively awful. Sandy B in the net is about as good as it gets.
Johnny Mnemonic.
Okay, sure. What about that really weird one with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe? Fuck, what's it called?
Is it The Insider? No.
He's his character's called Sid 6.7.
God.
It's really, really bad.
Virtuosity.
That's the one. It's really bad.
Is that the one that they remade from the guy who did Battlestar Galactica?
I don't know. I hope not.
No, that's Virtuality. That's a different thing.
Anyway, Claire turns out to be alive. So at one point there was a love triangle. There still kind of is, but there was a more explicit, Ethan and Claire have the hots for each other right under Jim's nose type thing. And apparently it didn't test well, so they cut some of it. There's enough of a skeleton there where you're expecting something to come of it, and it's I don't know if it takes her legs out from under her a bit, but it's all a bit weird as they're the last two survivors, and so they're bonded through trauma or whatever, but then it's it doesn't go all the way in a romantic direction.
It's weird. I mean, there's a 24-year age difference between Emmanuel Bear and John Voight, which right, okay, but we also have as you say, the bare bones of it. The first scene with Emmanuel Bear is when she's knocked out and Ethan gives her the drug to wake her up, and they kind of stare lovingly at each other, and then all the stuff where he's heavy breathing on top of her because he doesn't trust why she's alive.
Yeah.
Her kissing his hand when they're in London. It's like, this is a very weird relationship.
Yeah, like frisking her, and when he revives her, she like erotically caresses his thumb with her mouth and shit. It's like, what the fuck is happening here?
Like my partner turned to me after she starts kissing his hand when they're in London, and I was like, did they have sex? I'm like, I don't think so, because he's aware that her husband's alive now.
I think in one cut of the movie they did, but yeah.
Just come from the pub with her husband, who is alive, and goes like, I'm gonna cut this man.
Yeah. He arranges his meeting with Max, and we never really learn the background of Max, who Max is supposed to really be. Like, is she a corrupt member of MI5 or MI6 or something? Is she just some random well-off lady from the UK who just sells international secrets and shit? Who knows? But he sets up his meeting with her and offers to steal the real goddamn knock list, and he earns her trust by, saying, oh, Job's list is fake, go ahead, there'll be boys from Langley, like, hopping around any minute now, and they do it, and they do show up, so they get to safety, and she's like, oh, how could I have doubted you? It's like, it doesn't really prove all that much, but okay. So they make this deal, and Job will be at the handover so he can get his man. He has to go get the real fucking knock list, which is a massive security risk to everything. It's all very like, huh? Like, I know what happens, but it's still very what is happening right now, and it's like, oh, I guess we're off to Langley then for another really, really, really good scene. But my word, Vanessa Redgrave is having a very fun time, clearly.
Yeah, I think she's great, and like is a fun B-villain to the plot of it all.
Is she a villain? I mean, I guess she's trying to get the knock list. She's on the side of bad, but she's not really antagonistic towards Ethan in any way. I feel we needed some kind of explanation as to who the fuck Max is, but who knows. So they go to Langley, and that means recruiting Jean Reno and Ving Rhames. What a team. Big Ving Rhames, like, they cast him because they wanted someone who didn't look like the stereotypical hacker character in these films, and he sure doesn't. And then,
do you know what I really appreciate?
What?
They never really show him actually hacking.
That's true.
It's all just kind of like, you see a little bit and then like something on a screen will flip, but there's no like him furiously typing.
It's
and,
just him warning Ethan he has to get out of there now. That's all I remember him doing in both of these films. He's only in the first two, right?
No, he's in all of them.
Oh, is he in all of them? Oh, Jesus Christ, I blacked him out. Oh, shit.
Ving Rhames is in every single Mission Impossible movie. Like, he's not in 3 an awful lot, but he is in all of them.
Okay. I have seen 3 and 4, and I do not remember him, but that's cool. But yeah, all the memory I have of him in 1 and 2 is just him being like, Ethan, you've got to get out of there. And yeah, and Jean Reno, who, his background is he's like a pilot, and that's why he can fly the helicopter at the end, but it's like, why would you go get a pilot to go... And like, a key detail here is both of them are disavowed agents, and it's like, they say that Luther like hacked into, what's he hacked, like the Pentagon or something, the generic hacker shit that they do in these movies. And I don't know if they say what Jean Reno is supposed to have done, but yeah. Here he is. The scene where they are breaking down the security they have to overcome at Langley has become such a cliche, but it's so fucking good. Like, you think of like Ocean's 11, which almost repeats lines from this, and it's like, here's a code that we will not get, and then I just immediately thought of Brad Pitt being like, a combination we won't have, some codes we won't know, all that sort of stuff, and it feels like that must have been a 100% direct homage to Mission Impossible. But this entire scene, this is everything. This is the whole film. This is its legacy. This is why there are sequels, in my opinion, and it's really fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is like, it's almost entirely silent, which I think is really
so good. Yeah, so brave almost to just have that silence.
It is just a pure cinematic flex from Brian De Palma. It's so incredibly tense. Like, I know that they win in the end, but it still like plays up that tension so well, and it just looks really good. Tom Cruise coming down from the ceiling on the kind of fucking wires is an iconic image of film. And like, no matter what Mission Impossible you're talking about, like if you're talking about the Mission Impossible series, your header image is probably going to be that image.
There's certainly a riff on it in the second one. I don't remember if they try and do something similar to this in every one of them, but you see this clip of the moment where he almost drops to the floor and he's like trying to balance himself. Like, that clip plays everywhere all the time, and like him doing his little acrobatics to sort of be able to use the computer and catching his own sweat and and they can't make any noise, and there's a mouse or a rat.
Yeah, that Jean Reno has to like stab, but does it off camera. You just see its kind of corpse in the background.
I know, and it's like, but the knife isn't in it. But establishing he has the knife. Well, you saw he had the knife before. He's like, no body count, and he's like, yeah, we'll see. And it's like, he later puts together that he is the accomplice, but it's like, why? Because he has a knife. Surely half the agents in the IMF have fucking knives. Like, can he tell from the stab wound that it was this knife? Yeah, that always seemed incredibly convenient to me, that he's basically just sort of, who is a character in this film rather than in this real world I inhabit. But either way, this whole scene is amazing, and I don't know if it's the best heist scene ever, but it's very fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, I think the entire franchise is built around topping this scene from now on, and I think they get to it at points, but it's a very high bar.
Yeah.
They set themselves immediately.
It's parodied everywhere, and like even like the fucking Transformers comics that you've been reading recently, haven't you, Ben? They did that in that Shadowplay arc. The whole, here's the breakdown of what the building is like. How will we get in? We'll descend from the ceiling, obviously. You see it everywhere. Cartoons, films, TV shows. It's everywhere. And it's because it's really fucking good. And the fucking giant-ass knife falling just as they've done it and landing in the table, and that doofus walking in and be like, huh, a knife. I guess I could have left this here. Oh, wait, I should probably tell security.
I should probably tell security, because I've been puking my guts out for the last 10 minutes.
Yes.
After that woman sat uncomfortably close to me in the mess hall.
Yes, a fun moment there with this just poor random guy. And also, is this his job? Is this his office? Does he just sit in there typing on that all day? Or is it just like whenever he needs to access?
I guess it's just whenever he needs to access it, but it feels like he goes in there an awful lot for something that is like supposed to be quite top secret.
Yeah, and it's like, it can't be your office. Like, there's no pictures around.
Because like he's in there, and then he goes out to go read a newspaper for about 5 minutes apparently. And then he goes back in. And
then he leaves and goes back and leaves and goes back. And
yeah. And it's a very confusing work schedule. It leads to a lot of tension. But I also don't think he has a real job.
How dare you? You think they didn't come up with a full story for this man? Yeah. But, the scene around it, great, and them just sort of cruising on out of there in the fire truck and everything. It's just, great scene.
And then Tom Cruise just close-up magic.
Yes! Tom Cruise doing Tom Cruise-ass, like, being charming, doing sleight of hand. No trickery, legit Tom Cruise doing all of that. Great stuff.
He does his own stunts.
He does his... Do we call this a stunt?
This is definitely a stunt.
Okay.
Either Tom Cruise knew to do this before this movie, or Tom Cruise is the craziest motherfucker alive and learned close-up magic so this shot would work.
Dude, look, you've seen Tom Cruise. There is no chance Tom Cruise isn't the type of person that hadn't learned sleight of hand at some point in his life. Like, he is definitely someone who tried to become a magician in an earlier part of his life. And I really like the touch that Krieger did have the disc the whole time. He suddenly turns on him. He's like, you're not doing anything without me. And he's like, you think I would give you the knock list? And then he goes through all of this shit and he throws it in the bin, his fake copy, and then it turns out it's the real one. And Ethan Hunt just imagined all of, he just improvised all of this on the spot. And it's like, what if he'd broken the knock list when he threw it angrily in the bin? Or kept the disc anyway or something? Like, I guess he would have had to pickpocket it off him later. Jim reveals himself to be alive and claims that Kittredge is the mole, which, if you're real stupid, you might believe, because they have tried to make Kittredge seem evil. But Ethan had already started to put together that it is Phelps because of the whole Bible thing. And then, as you said, this quite interesting conversation where they're walking it through with each other, like, oh, how would he have done this? And we're seeing what Jim actually did. And by the way, the first-person view of him getting shot didn't look convincing even at the beginning of the film, because you can see the bend in the wrist, and it's like, okay then.
But they're watching it on like little tiny wrist watches or whatever, so I can imagine it being like, I mean, what's that? It's like 108p or something for image clarity.
Yeah, all the P's, all the I's. It's an interesting thing, and like to see Ethan not actually press that and just sort of in his own head he's figured it out.
Well, that's the thing. So the most interesting part of it is, and the kind of bit that makes you realise that it's probably Ethan figuring it out, is the double take of who blew up the car. Because the initial cut of that is Claire did it, and then he goes, oh no, wait, he would have had time to go from the bridge to blow up the car, and then it's Jim in the river. kind of doing it. And that's the only kind of tell that the scene gives that this is Ethan figuring it out.
And then he gets to play this like invisible ninja in the sort of the handover of the disc on the train with him, you know, calling Max up, and it's like, okay, we can't see him. We haven't seen Tom Cruise on the screen for over 3 minutes. What's going on? And the ridiculous stereo gun that Jim has, because he can't get a gun on a train, which is totally not true. You don't get... I mean, I guess if it's the Eurostar, I guess it's supposed to be. They call it like the TNG or the T-something, TNC, I don't know. It's a very fast train that Tom Cruise had to schmooze their ability to use. They turned down Brian De Palma, and then Tom Cruise took like their chairman out for dinner or something, and the next day they were given permission to use the train. But yeah, he's got this like, it's like a boombox, and he takes parts of it apart and screws together this gun, and it's like, I mean, I guess that's cool, but ultimately meaningless, because there are like no gunshots in this movie. There are no... Ethan doesn't fire a gun once. There's not really much in the way of a shootout, and I'm like, doesn't this dude end up becoming like a Jason Bourne Bond ass, like just murders everyone type character? But
I mean,
none of it here.
There's not much gunshots really. Like other people use guns more than Ethan does. He's more running.
Oh, Tom Cruise always running.
I mean, I'm also very confused about like the fact that Kittredge gets to London, then goes, "Take me to London Terminus." It's like there's like 18 London terminuses. What the hell does this mean?
Don't you worry about it. Anyone outside, you know, this is America's view of every other country. It's like, oh, they're tiny. There's one city. There's one station. It's great. Ethan has like sent him tickets for the right train to like, you know, hey.
I mean, I'm assuming it's King's Cross. So they've gone from Liverpool Street to King's Cross, which is very weird for me because I'm sat there going like, this is the station I go to every single morning.
I know, and seeing fucking phone booths with the old BT logo on them and stuff. Like, what is all of this? I haven't seen a phone booth out in the wild in a long time.
And then he's like, oh yeah, we can get from Tower Bridge to to King's Cross in 20 minutes. I'm like,
Look.
That's going to be some very clear roads.
Look, they're about to climb on top of a fucking train, Ben. Like, there's no room for realism here. Yeah, he sits there as Jim in the baggage car. Claire turns up and is like, we've gotten away with it. And then it's fucking Tom Cruise in the mask. And everything is revealed, and at first it looks like they're just doing something subversive with the camera. Like, you see like a first-person camera like go up against that little grate, and then you're like, oh, Kittredge, Jim must be in there. And then he's not at first, and it's like, oh, maybe they're just trying to trick you. And then yeah, Jim is just totally just right next to him, and it's this sort of escalating series of like aha type moments. And then he fucking shoots his wife. Like, does he give a shit about his wife? Like, he's like, I knew you'd take the bait because like I tested the goods for myself. And it's like, that's your wife. Like, what's happening here?
He's an evil man.
Yes, but has he been married to her for however long just that he could one day pull this move on someone? Like,
I don't know. And maybe it plays better if he does actually have sex with her.
Maybe. And yeah, Ethan gotchas him back and puts the glasses on, and Kittredge is watching it all through his little wristwatch. And it's like, shit, everyone knows you're alive again, you're screwed. And then they end up on top of the fucking train, and Tom Cruise insisted on a wind machine so powerful it would manipulate his face. And there was one in Europe, and they got it. So, nice flex, Tom. And yeah, I'm not going to say it looks super convincing, but for a film of this era, with green screen technology not being what it is now, it's a pretty good looking, they're on top of a train type scene. Like, I think that wind machine does help. Like, you can see that the wind is like making their fucking faces go all weird and shit. The ridiculousness of a helicopter going through the fucking tunnel is something else. But the gum that is, you know, they set it up at the beginning. It's like, oh, when you combine these two halves, boom, and then he uses it in the restaurant, and then for it to come back at the end and be the thing he uses to kill them, it's like, okay, that's nice signposting you've got here. And it's good that he did use it earlier on so that you weren't just waiting for that to come up. In Bond, when they tease a gadget and then he hasn't used it, and they were at the climax of the film, it's like, well, he's obviously going to use the magical laser wristwatch or something. But they used it earlier on to take that out of your mind. And yeah, I don't know, it's not really much in the way of a final confrontation, because I'm sitting here now talking about it, and I don't really remember how it plays out beyond he forces him to get into the tunnel, and then he jumps to the helicopter and puts the gum on, and then he jumps back, or he is blown back by the explosion or whatever. But it's like, it's not like a big grand fist fight It's not a grand shootout, but I guess that's not really what it's about at this stage.
I mean, even down to like Jim Phelps he just kind of like disappears. Mm-hmm. For a second, I was like, is the movie going to go on longer and he's going to like walk back to the train? But no, he just got crushed under the wreckage.
Yeah, he's just gone.
I did get confused for a second. I was like, oh, when's he going to cut his head off with the thing? I was like, no, wait, that's Speed.
Yes. Yeah, the blade's coming to a stop right in front of his neck and all that. And then Luther hands the knock list back to Kittredge and they make a deal. They arrest Max, and then Max is like, oh, my lawyers will do this. And he's like, we'll keep this out of the courts. It's like, what does that mean? Are you going to like fucking let her go? And like,
no, they're gonna black bag her.
Do some waterboarding. Yeah, and Luther and Ethan end up back in the IMF, and it's all great, and we have sequels galore ahead of us. But I'll just keep saying it. Like, the Prague scene, the vault scene, and the train scene are all like really, really, really good. And everything else is a big giant mess, and it's very obvious they didn't have a script to hand. There's enough here, and like it was a nice big hit out of nowhere. And
I mean, that's the thing is, at the end of the day, the movie made almost $500 million at the box office, and I have to assume that the third highest grossing movie in 1996, I have to assume most of its money came from the US rather than being like a worldwide total as well.
I think they haven't ever not been making Bond, really. And GoldenEye, I think, was a pretty big hit.
This is like a year after the longest break that Bond's ever taken, because it's like 89 and then Bond doesn't come back till 95, and they kind of hint that they're going to start like a little bit of a reboot, and GoldenEye's a lot more serious than Bond was.
Yes.
It slowly starts to devolve as it goes on.
Well, I don't know, those two Dalton ones are serious, they're just very different. There's that super fucking violent one with the whole like Miami Vice type shit going on. It's an answer to it. We've got another player in the game, as it were, and I don't know if they knew the moment this came out they were going to do more, but I think it certainly was it's a hell of a debut for a franchise.
I mean, it feels like there was like a mini resurgence of movies about spies in the late 90s that were like from TV shows, because The Avengers is a couple years after this, I feel.
Yeah, not the Avengers, but the Avengers.
The Avengers, the original. I mean, I can't even type Avengers into Google without it coming up with like the fucking movies.
That's what Marvel did.
Even though it can't be named that in the UK.
Exactly.
Avengers must be called Avengers Assemble because the Avengers already existed. That very well-known movie starring Ralph Fiennes and Uma Thurman.
And then that very much better-known TV show.
Yes.
So, I think by the time we're done with this will be on the lower end of things, but it's still good. I think a lot of movies owe a lot to it.
It's kind of insane that this is probably the weakest first step for any of the three of these.
Yeah.
Like I've not seen Bourne Identity all the way through.
I'm really excited.
That's, like, every time I see Bourne Identity, I get to about the scene in the office or the apartment or wherever it is, and they have the big fight in there, and then I stop. And then if I come back with the scene in the grass and the sniper.
Yeah, Clive.
And that's like my knowledge of that movie is basically the chunk up until that apartment scene, and then in a field.
That is most of it. Yeah,
I'm sure I've seen most of the movie. I've just never seen it all in one sitting. And then the only other Bourne movie I've seen is Jason Bourne.
And I haven't seen Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
That's the only one I haven't. I think it's going to sit on the sort of top of the lower tier, is how I would assess this. But speaking of assessing, we've come up with some regular segments to assess these movies by. So we have Villain Watch returning from Ben and Matt's Marvelous Journey. Bond villains are a huge, huge staple of this genre, and I think all the 3 or 4 we have here are solid, but not really memorable. Like, you are naturally predisposed to not like John Voight, which is wild, because when they cast him, they didn't think anyone would suspect he'd be a villain, and it's like, I feel everyone thinks that guy's a fucking asshole, but maybe they just didn't know at the time. It's a nice twist to have, the hero of the old show become the villain. Kittredge is a decent red herring, I think. Like, he's very unlikable. I agree, it would have been nice to see him come back as a sort of connective thing between the sequels. Then Jean Reno was in that paedophile movie, so fuck him. You're also naturally generally disposed to not like him. And Max is fun as well. But then none of them are like huge standouts. Like, there's no Jaws, there's no Odd Jobs sort of henchman who's iconic here. There's no huge villain.
Yeah, we're not at the point yet where Bond is just casting Oscar winners for every single movie.
Yeah, and also, by the by, I think most of these movies, the villain watch is going to be like that, because all of the iconic villains in this sort of franchise, they are all in the past for the most part, but there's going to be some really good performances at least.
We'll see where you land on the Mission Impossible stuff, but I do think the villains are going to get better with this series.
Well, that's good.
One of my favourite performances in any of these movies is in the third Mission Impossible movie.
Yes. Oh, God, yes. Oh, I'm sexually excited. Our next section is, how did they survive? And this isn't actually that bad. Like, Ethan, aside from everything that happens on the train, Ethan doesn't do anything that dangerous in this first one. So I'm kind of willing to, like, give this a bit of a pass. But
yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, like, he's got a stunt harness on, but that's something that they wear on set normally for the big one. He hasn't gone into, like, full Tom Cruise insane mode where, what if we attach a camera to this plane and take off? which is where the series is going. It's just kind of like, obviously he's doing the stunts and it makes the movie look better, but it's being done in a far more controlled, like, on a set with green screens way than the insanity of the, like, let's go to a location and do a stunt that, like, my insurance premium must be insane.
I am told he could have drowned in that fish tank scene, but who knows. So this one, relatively mild. Things will get crazy. And finally, female agency. A great pun there. So women are not treated that well. Like, Bond girls are a cliche, and they are generally eye candy who have sex with James Bond shortly after meeting him and then die, or flirt with him all for the whole film and then bang him at the end as the credits play. And that has, thankfully, mostly been retired, but it's nice to check in on how women are treated in these films, and I think taking away that full-on love triangle with Claire does cut her legs out from under her a bit, and she does still get sort of, like, roughed up by Ethan and, like, still has to die at the hands of a lover and all of that, which is
still after the incredibly creepy line of her, like, of John Boyd going, I got a taste of her and realised that you wouldn't be able to resist.
Sampled the goods.
Yeah. There, and it's just like, okay.
Yeah, all that is bad,
also,
but
it makes him more villainous, which is
yes, but I do think she has a decent role in the heist. You're expecting her to, like, seduce the guy or something. It's like, oh, you'll wear, like, a little pencil skirt and lean over or something and distract him, but it's not really that. She just sort of is subtle enough in planting a bug on him and like drugging his drink, and at the beginning as well, like, I guess her role isn't as big there, but, you know, she's treated as a team member. It's not like, oh, and you're just here as a pair of legs and a skirt.
She is more involved because, like, the original scene with Kristen Scott Thomas and Ingeborg, not even going to attempt the surname, where they're in there and you understand what Kristen Scott Thomas's role is, but you don't understand what the other woman's role is, because they've got these two women who are both, like, surveillance, and one's in the car, and they're both very much not involved as much as like Emilio Estevez and Tom Cruise and whatnot are. Yeah,
and as a sort of secondary, Kristen Scott Thomas is really good as well. I think, like, she's fun at the beginning.
I mean, that's the thing is, I think all three women who kind of get to give a bit of a performance do the best that they can do with the material they're given. Yeah. Vanessa Redgrave's obviously having the most fun. Kristen Scott Thomas actually leaves quite a big impression. I think I remember her more in this movie than I do Emmanuel Bear.
I think she said, I only have to be in the film for 20 minutes and I die in Tom Cruise's arms. Of course I wanted to do it, or something like that. So, you know, it's not awful treatment, I wouldn't say, but it would be nice to see an even bigger female presence, so maybe we'll get one as we go.
Yeah, I mean, like, my partner asked me when I told her that we were doing Bond, Bourne and Mission Impossible, and she kind of said, like, are you going to do a female action series? And I was just like, think about that for a second. What comparative female action series could we possibly do, because Hollywood is so bad at this?
None of them get sequels, even if they get one movie.
Yeah, do we do Charlie's Angels?
That first one fucks, man. Sam Rockwell, half star added. Come on.
I want to do it just for Justin Theroux's Irish accent.
Give me the rangs.
And
God, I forgot all about that. I'm sorry, I need a moment.
I watched the latest Charlie's Angels the other week, and I was like, this is kind of bad. And that's even with a movie that features a very horny Kristen Stewart and Naomi Scott.
Mm-hmm. Ask questions, everyone. I think that will do. Chronologically, it should be Mission Impossible 2 next, but we wanted to bounce back and forth, so we're going to do Bourne Identity next, and then we will do Mission Impossible 2. You know, just so we can have some comparison here. And I am really, really looking forward to watching Bourne Identity again, so that will be next week. Stay tuned to EnterTheRobot.com. Like, comment, subscribe. Mike and Matt on SoundCloud. Check out all the podcasts, all the written stuff. It's a new year. Maybe some new features, some new stuff. Who knows?
Maybe you'll have done a podcast on Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, I'm seeing that tomorrow, and I look forward to it. I forgot that Mike Thomas hates The Last Jedi and is thus wrong. That'll be fun. But Ben and I, we love The Last Jedi, so we go with God. Thank you, Ben, for our first episode of Secret Agent Men.
Matt's looking forward to sub-hour-long episodes.
And yeah, 1 hour, 5 minutes record. Bye, everyone!
Secret agent.